Welcome, Night Owls. This is Midnight FM. Tonight, Officer Hayes is back with us in the studio. He's here to share one of the strangest cases he ever worked. One that started like an ordinary traffic call and ended in something no report could explain. Officer Hayes, the mic is yours.
Thanks, Jacob. You know, most of the time, my job is routine. Calls, paperwork, traffic stops. But sometimes, you get something that doesn't fit. This one happened a few years back. Middle of summer. Hot night. Heavy air. I was on patrol. Nothing unusual. Then dispatch came over the radio. 911 call from a rideshare driver. Guy was pulled over on the side of the highway, saying his passenger had vanished. That was the word he used, vanished. I figured he meant the rider bailed out mid-trip, maybe ran off without paying. Happens sometimes. But the dispatcher's tone was off. She sounded rattled. So I drove out. When I got there, the car was parked under a streetlight, hazards blinking. The driver, mid-30s, nervous, was pacing outside, wiping sweat off his forehead, even though it wasn't that hot. I asked him what happened. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands and told me everything.
He said he'd picked up a young woman downtown, early 20s maybe. She got into the back seat, gave an address about 20 minutes away. Nothing strange about her. She was pale, but that's not unusual. Dressed in a light jacket even though the night was warm, quiet, polite. The kind of drivers like, no small talk, no trouble. They drove for about 10 minutes, highway stretched out ahead, trees on either side. Then he glanced into the rearview mirror. She wasn't there. Not asleep, not slouched down, just gone. One moment, a passenger in the back seat. The next, an empty seatbelt. Faint indentation in the cushion, like she'd never been there at all. He panicked, pulled over, called 911. By the time I arrived, he was shaking so bad he could hardly stand. I checked the car. Rear door still locked from the inside. Seatbelt buckled, loose on the seat. But the cushion was indented, like someone had been sitting there just minutes ago. I asked for the address she'd given him. He showed me the app. It was a cemetery. Now, I've been in this job long enough to hear my share of strange things, but this shook me. The driver wasn't drunk, he wasn't high, he was terrified in a way you don't fake. I wrote it up as a suspicious incident. What else could I do? But it didn't stop there. A week later, another driver called in. Same thing. Young woman, same description. Picked her up late at night, quiet, pale, polite. She gave an address, different this time, but still out past town. Halfway there, gone. Vanished into thin air. And that's when I realized this wasn't just one driver losing his mind. Something else was happening. The car was parked under a flickering streetlight. Hazards on. The driver stood outside, pacing, smoking like his nerves were shot. I walked up, asked him what happened. He told me the story, same as I mentioned before. Picked up a young woman downtown, early 20s, pale, polite. She gave him an address. Halfway there, she was gone. No door opening, no seatbelt click, just gone. I checked the car. Rear doors locked from the inside. No signs of anyone getting out. Seatbelt loose across the cushion, and the cushion itself pressed down, like someone had been sitting there minutes before. That's the part that got me, because impressions like that don't lie. I looked at the address she'd entered into his rideshare app. It wasn't a house. It wasn't even a business. It was a cemetery. I wrote it up, but I'll be honest, there was much to put in the report. Suspicious incident. That's all I could call it. But I couldn't shake it. The way the driver trembled, pale as paper, the smell of sweat and cigarette smoke clinging to him. He wasn't acting.
A week later, I got another call. Different driver, same story. He'd picked up a young woman late at night. Same description. Pale, quiet, polite. She sat in the back seat, gave an address. Halfway through the trip, he glanced at the mirror. Empty. He pulled over, panicked, called 911. By the time I arrived, he was a wreck. And this time, the address she'd given him was a house. When I ran it through the system, it didn't exist anymore. The house had burned down years before. Now, 2 strange calls like that, you can chalk it up to coincidence. 2 people lying, 2 people hallucinating, whatever. But then it happened again and again. 4 drivers in the span of 2 months, all describing the same passenger. Young, pale, polite, always gone before the ride was over. I started digging, asked questions around the department. Turns out, older officers had heard it before. Not with ride shares, but taxis. Back in the 80s, cab drivers would whisper about the ghost fare. Pick her up, drive a few miles, then empty back seat. Sometimes she left behind a scarf, sometimes just the smell of perfume. And always, the destination was tied to death. A burned house, a closed hospital, a graveyard. I'll admit, I didn't buy it at first. I've dealt with plenty of strange calls, but ghosts? No. Then came the night I saw her myself.
I was on patrol near the outskirts of town. Highway quiet when I saw a car pulled over. Hazards on. Driver standing outside, phone pressed to his ear. I slowed, rolled down the window. He waved me down, frantic. "Officer," he said, "she's gone. She was just here." I asked who. He pointed to the back seat. I shined my light. The seatbelt was buckled. The cushion pressed down. Indentation of a body still fresh, but no one was there. I asked him to start from the beginning. Picked her up outside a diner. She slid into the back seat, gave him an address on the far side of town. He said she never spoke again, just stared out the window. Then halfway through the drive, gone. He swore he hadn't heard a door, hadn't seen her move. Just there 1 second, empty the next. I was about to chalk it up to panic when something caught my eye. The window. Fogged. Not from the driver's breath. He was sitting in front. This was in the back, on the glass behind the passenger seat. Faint but clear. A handprint. Small, delicate, pressed into the condensation like someone had leaned there. And I touched it. Still damp. Still warm. And that was when the hair on the back of my neck stood straight up. The driver begged me not to leave him alone. Said he felt like she was still there, watching. I told him to go home, get some rest. But the truth is, I didn't sleep that night either. Because when I sat back in my cruiser, headlights cutting the dark highway, I glanced in my mirror. And for just a second, I swear, I saw her. A pale face in my own back seat.
A pale face in my own back seat. After that night, I couldn't shake the image. That handprint on the window, that pale face in my own rearview mirror. I told myself it was exhaustion. Too many late shifts, too many strange calls. But the more I looked, the more I found. Other towns had seen her too. Not just here, not just one state. I talked to a state trooper friend of mine over coffee one morning. I told him about the rideshare cases. He went quiet, then said, "You just described a call I got last year. Different town, different driver, same passenger. Young woman, pale, quiet, always alone, always polite, and always gone before the ride ended." I started digging through old case files. Cab drivers in the 80s, truckers in the 90s, even horse and buggy stories from the early 1900s, back when the roads were dirt and the passenger was described as a woman asking for a ride into town only to vanish before they arrived. The descriptions never changed. What unsettled me most was how many times the destination was tied to death. One cabbie reported driving her to an old church, burned down years before. Another said she asked for a boarding house that had been torn down after a fire killed half the residents. More than once, the address was a cemetery. It was like she was trying to go home. Or maybe she was trying to bring the driver there with her. The strangest case came from a driver in another county. He said he picked her up outside a shopping mall. She sat quiet in the back seat. Halfway into the drive, she leaned forward, whispered the address, then sat back again. He said her breath fogged the glass between them, but when he looked, she was gone. He pulled over, heart racing, checked the back seat, empty, but there on the seatbelt, a strand of hair, black, long, tangled around the buckle. He kept it, locked it in a bag, brought it straight to the sheriff. The lab tested it, and here's the kicker. The hair didn't match any living person in the database. The DNA profile was incomplete, like it didn't belong to anyone alive. I'll admit, I was obsessed. Every spare minute I read, every break I asked other officers, and the more I listened, the more I realized this wasn't just a ghost story. It was a pattern, something that had been happening for a century. And I wasn't done with it.
My own encounter came a few months later. Late fall, leaves blown across the highways, night air cold enough to frost the windows. I'd pulled into a diner to grab coffee. When I came back out, my cruiser was parked under the glow of a lone streetlight. I opened the driver's door and froze, because in the back seat, clear as day, sat a woman. She didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, pale hands folded neatly in her lap. I should have reached for my weapon, should have ordered her out of the car, but something about her presence, I couldn't. It was like my voice was gone, swallowed by the cold air. She lifted her head slowly, met my eyes in the mirror, and smiled. I blinked, and she was gone. The seatbelt was buckled, the cushion indented, and in the silence of that empty street, I swear I smelled roses. Faint, sweet, out of place. I sat there, gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. I couldn't move. Finally, I started the car and drove. Didn't look back. Didn't breathe. Until I pulled into the station lot. Since then, I've heard more stories. Too many to count. Drivers across states, across decades.
All describing the same thing, the phantom passenger. And the worst part? Every driver I've talked to says the same thing when I ask what it felt like. They say for a moment, they wanted to keep driving, keep going, like she was guiding them somewhere they weren't supposed to return from. There's something about driving at night that makes the world feel thinner. The hum of tires on pavement, the endless stretch of dark road, headlights carving a tunnel through the black. It's a liminal space between places, between times. And that's where she waits. After my encounter, I kept listening to drivers. Some refused to talk, shaking their heads, eyes downcast. Others whispered their stories like confessions. One man told me he'd given her a ride late one December night. Snow fell heavy, blanketing the road in silence. She sat quietly in the back seat, hands folded, eyes down. When he glanced in the mirror, she was gone. But when he reached the end of the trip, his GPS chimed, "You have arrived." And there, on the side of the road, stood the same woman, waiting, smiling. Another driver swore he saw her reflection in the rearview even after the back seat was empty. She stayed in the mirror for miles, watching, smiling faintly. When he finally ripped it off the windshield in panic, the glass cracked, and for a second, he swore he saw her face behind him, inches away. He doesn't drive nights anymore. I ask myself why she rides, why she appears to strangers again and again. Some say she died in a car crash, looking for her way home. Others believe she was murdered, forever searching for a ride to her grave. And a few believe she isn't human at all, that she's something older, something that wears the shape of a passenger so she can slip into our world unnoticed, that she doesn't want a ride, she wants a driver. Because here's the part I never wrote in my report. The night I saw her in my cruiser, when her pale face smiled in the mirror, I felt it. Not fear, not dread, but a pull. Like I wanted to keep driving. Like I'd follow her anywhere she asked me to go. And I know, if I hadn't blinked, if she hadn't vanished, I might have done it. I might have kept driving until the gas dried up, until the road ended. And I don't think I would be the one behind the wheel anymore. That's the danger of the phantom passenger. It's not that she disappears. It's that for a moment, you want to go with her. And once you see her, once you really see her, she doesn't forget you. I've been a cop long enough to tell you most monsters are human, but some aren't. So if you drive nights, rideshare, taxi, truck, be careful who you let in the back seat. And if you see her, a pale young woman, quiet, polite, eyes too dark, too empty, don't look in the mirror too long. Don't follow where she leads, because the fare she takes isn't money. It's you.
This has been Midnight FM. I'm your host, R.J. Jacob with Officer Hayes. Until next time, Night Howls, drive safe and don't forget to check your back seat.